Hey everyone, I want to do my best to do justice and show respect and solidarity with Brad Larison of Reuters, however you want to say it, for this particular article, and it's in the Atlantic, which that's the thing with someone like myself. I mean, I don't just look to, those who cheerlead from what I would consider or perceive as those who promote and espouse or play on the same team that I choose to, right? Which predominantly would be, libertarians, anarchists, philosophers, voluntarists. I recognize there are people in the main establishment media that probably have those same critical thinking skills and underlying fundamentals. But because media, for the most part, is split down the middle with left and right? Politics divides the kind of news, the kind of media that you're used to. But I recognize that because I respect and recognize the individual, I acknowledge that there are individuals that may, create articles or videos or any other kind of literature or publications that have to do so with some entrenched media platform so that they can, get their voices out there and heard to large masses of the population. And this Brad Larison, whether he's part of Reuters or it's just he created an article that Reuters produced and put on, and the Atlantic in turn propagated that same article. But either way, mad respect to him and all those involved who put out these very profound articles that are so important. People don't realize that you hear a lot of propaganda, a lot of political bullshit spewed at you on a constant basis. But there are still people out there that I acknowledge and I respect and I admire greatly that put politics on the back burner and just speak truth to reason in the hopes of educating and informing the masses, right? And in reality, that is what has always advanced human intellect and understanding, not just regarding social and economic, but all aspects of freedom. Let me dig in right now by first telling you what the headline of this article is. And like I said, this is in the Atlantic. So even though a lot of times they predominantly, or a lot of the people that contribute to the Atlantic would be considered leftists, I have personally seen and acknowledged that that's not always the case, which is why I still look to these venues and will always give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Headline: enforcing the law is inherently violent. You've probably heard this said many times on many occasions from those who consider themselves libertarians, genuine anarchists, or voluntarists, that all laws come as a consequence of the direct threat of force and coercion to enforce those laws. That's how laws come to exist. So while people might say all the time, and you've probably heard it many times over, oh, there should be a law against this, or there should be a law against that, or there should be a law against, whatever, right? But this person, or this Brad Larison that's writing this article, and this Yale law professor that he is referencing during this article, these are people that are putting all politics aside and just speaking truth to reason. And a lot of times they will be, they will suffer as a result of doing so. So they're taking a chance. They're being a bit risque for doing so. So kudos to them for at least trying. You know, in this atmosphere of propaganda and bullshit and rhetoric, right? Thank goodness there are people that are still willing to speak truth to reason. And not just throwing their hands up in the air. Or not just moving away or living on some, island or in the woods, right? Thank goodness there are people that are willing to stand solidly and strong for truth and reason and logic, even in the face of such opposition. A Yale law professor suggests that oft ignored truth should inform debates about what statutes and regulations to codify. Yale law professor Stephen L. Carter believes that the United States would benefit if the debate about what laws ought to be passed acknowledged the violence inherent in enforcing them. I'm going to read that one more time because it's profoundly important for anyone to understand that, yes, all laws, every time you ask for a law to be written, brought to fruition, or enforced, it always has to come by a way of the threat of violence and force and coercion. So, once again, Yale law professor Stephen L. Carter believes that the United States would benefit if the debate about what laws ought to be passed acknowledged the violence inherent in enforcing them. Wow, right? He writes, I hope I can do this article justice. I'm going to try to keep the profanities at a minimum. I just want, to me, the most important thing about this is that you take away the message that is instinctive and inherent in people that are talking about this. They're trying to tell you objectively that laws that are created through government, central planners, are always a direct result and a consequence of someone using violence and imposing their will on others. Law professors and lawyers instinctively shy away from considering the problem of law as violence. Every law is violent. We try not to think about this, but we should. On the first day of law school, I tell my contract students never to argue for invoking the power of law except in a cause for which they are willing to kill. They are suitably astonished and often annoyed, but I point out that even a breach of contract requires a judicial remedy, and if the breacher will not pay damages, the sheriff will sequester his house and goods, and if he resists the forced sale of his property, the sheriff might have to shoot him. That's truth, people. I mean, all the morons that when they talk about it's like, well, if you break the law, well, no violence is like, so if you break the law, well, no violence is immediately used. Let's use the term like of a speeding ticket. They might say, well, no, there's no violence used against you when an officer pulls you over and writes you a ticket. But they forget or they neglect to acknowledge the fact that the only way that works out properly is if the people or the person that's being pulled over by the cop yields and obeys to the edicts of that officer or the laws they enforce. If they challenge that in any way, shape, or form, it's a continual escalation right up until the point whether you put in a cage. Predominantly, they will choose most of the time to put you in a cage under lock and key rather than to kill you, because, and it's not that they wouldn't rather kill you because that would be much easier for them, but they don't do it because of the perception of what that would look like to the rest of the public, right? It's all about PR when it comes to this kind of political posturing and laws, right? But in reality, every single law that's written, the ultimate, if anyone that opposes or stands up against those laws, the ultimate consequence of refusing to go along, to get along, or obeying the edicts of the political laws that are made is death or imprisonment, right? That's the reality of it. You can try to pretend that that is not the case, but that is the case. There's just no way to skirt that reality. This is by no means an argument against having laws, of course. There's always going to have to be examples where we need laws, where violence is necessary to protect people. But violence is only supposed to be used as a means to protect people, not to circumvent freedoms, not to be preemptive, not to be preventative, but only as a means to defend others. That's it. The threat of violence should never be used as a means to an end outside of anything that is to defend people that are actually directly affected by someone's threat of violence or coercion or theft against them. Absent the direct threat of force, violence, or theft against them, no law should ever come to exist where it flips that upside down, where now the use of violence is preemptive. It is an argument for a degree of humility as we choose which of the many things we may not like to make illegal. Behind every exercise of law stands the sheriff or the SWAT team, or, if necessary, the National Guard. Is this an exaggeration? Ask the family of Eric Garner, who died as a result of a decision to crack down on the sale of untaxed cigarettes. That's the crime for which he was being arrested. Yes, the police were the proximate cause of his death, but the crackdown was a political decree. So, even though both wrongs don't make it right, the police carrying out and enforcing the edicts of their political master, no one can give this guy an escape clause just because he's following orders, as we all know now after the Nuremberg trials, right? But yes, it was that political decree in the first place that even allowed this police officer or these police officers to fly under that guise of authority, right? To allow themselves to subjugate their own morality and place the central authority, the law, as their go-to decree of why they did what they did. It wasn't me, I'm just following orders. Or, hey, it's the law, right? This is the inherent problem with creating laws as a means to an end. They are all ultimately enforced and arbitrated by the whims of central planners, force, and coercion. The statute or regulation we like best carries the same risk that some violator will die at the hands of a law enforcement officer who will go too far. And whether that officer acts out of overzealousness, recklessness, or simply the need to make a fast choice to do the job right, the violence inherent in law will be on display. This seems to me the fundamental problem that none of us who do law for a living want to face, but all of us should. On Thursday, Professor Carter will take part in panels on academic freedom and democratic cultures at the Aspen Ideas Festival, co-sponsored by the Aspen Institute and The Atlantic. He is astute to include regulation in his proposed debate, because regulation is also a law. People might not look at regulation the same as criminal law, but it is. They all carry that same presumptive use of force and coercion and theft as a means to an end. In recent decades, agencies in the federal bureaucracy that few members of the public would associate with law enforcement have assembled SWAT units that carry out paramilitary raids, often against unarmed citizens engaged in nonviolent transgressions. Are any readers persuaded by the notion that some laws they would otherwise support are better repealed or never passed because the benefits do not justify the violence that is likely to be triggered, sooner or later, by attempts at enforcement? I don't know. But this is the biggest question, or this is the biggest thing that we have to, this is the biggest question that we all need to answer. it's something that most people want to shy away from, but it is a question that once asked, it is vitally important that people step up to the plate, own and acknowledge it, especially if you believe in democracy, right? Or mob or majority rule, where you're using personal preferences, edicts as a means to an end, and creating legislation as that means to an end, as the ultimate arbiter, is people have to own up to the fact that when you are choosing to promote a law, what you're ultimately doing is you're saying is I want to use violence, theft, and oppression as a means to an end against those who I don't like, or against those who carry out acts or procedures or speech that I go against, that I don't particularly care for. Using violence as a means to an end, aka government, has only continually be shown to be a detriment for humanity, to be a detriment for freedom, to be a detriment to the individual and liberty. It's being proven time and time again, and now we have articles coming out from publications on both sides of the political spectrum that are at least owning up to and acknowledging this reality. Good for them. It's vitally important that they do so. I hope they keep propagating that message and helping to educate and inform others regarding the inherent immorality and violence that is the state, that is government, that is central planning. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.